So even a country like India, which is very diverse, the decline has been very, very fast. Iran's decline has been incredibly fast. And all of the popular explanations, all of the things that the general public would say, oh, this is why fertility changed. Like we have birth control pills, rubber condoms, one-child policy. If you just look at the timing of these innovations against the timing of the fertility decline, you see that it can't possibly be true. In Europe, long before there was any kind of technology to control births, the fertility declined. The one-child policy, actually, the fertility in China had declined before the one-child policy was instituted, really. Oh, yes, sorry. Right. I'm nervous because I worry I'll press the wrong thing. There it is. Yeah. So the one-child policy in China, the Chinese fertility was very low by the time the one-child policy was instituted, and a lot of people say, oh, it's religion that keeps fertility high, but in Iran, it was right after the revolution, which made it a Muslim state, that fertility plummeted there. So anyways, it's crazy. So anyways, the conclusion of the first part is there was this early and key change in the evolution of modernity, is that humans mysteriously abandoned competition for biological fitness. So I'm going to talk about why we think it happened. So Darwin's theory explains why living things behave as if they're trying to maximize fitness. Offspring tend to be similar to their parents. They inherit their parents' characteristics. Of course, everything alive today is descended from people who had offspring. A very, very long line of ancestors who succeeded in raising offspring. And so we know that all living things have inherited characteristics associated with producing and raising offspring. And most of our ancestors had the most offspring. So why did this change? Well, so we have these notional peasant folk who got married in 1860, and they did the typical thing of married couples of their time. They had loads of kids, about 8. And the strange thing is that those kids that they produced only produced a couple of kids themselves. So the grandparents, having worked ever so hard to raise 8 kids successfully, only managed to get a few grandchildren out of it. So what's going on there? Because we know that those kids inherited the genes of their parents. Why did whatever those genes do, why didn't it result in them producing a lot of grandchildren for them? Well, of course it's because humans inherit cultural ideas. They don't just inherit genes. And so we have to assume that those grandparental peasant people, they had inherited from their parents loads of cultural ideas, such as, oh, children are the natural result of marriage. We need to carry on the family name. This is what people said. Children are a blessing. We can't interfere with God's will. And of course, it's natural. A woman who doesn't want children is unnatural. And then the old one that everybody knows isn't true. The children will look after me in my old age, so they're an insurance policy. And the other curious idea is that you have to have lots of children to increase your stake in gambling for the future. So these are all cultural ideas that encouraged Grandma and Grandpa married in 1860 to have 8 children, as many children as they could possibly afford. So why weren't their children inheriting those cultural ideas? And so the reason is that when the grandparents grew up, the family was the main social institution. Like Pete talked about, it's hard to invent new social institutions. The family is a social institution going back hundreds of thousands of years. The family organized labor, it trained children, it provided houses, it provided nursing care, health care. The leisure activities were organized through the family, welfare, all that, all happened in the family. People needed their family. They spent a great deal of time with their family. Not just their parents, but their cousins, everything. And so being a member of a family was their main social identity. Their name was even their family name. And so social psychologists' experiments have shown that if you identify with a group, you internalize their norms, you internalize their goals. So these people internalized the goals of their families. They saw their family goals as their own goals. They were therefore primed to inherit the cultural information that furthered the interests of their family. And so populations with this family-based structure maintained norms that encouraged individuals to put family interests ahead of their own interests and own desires. And of course, for the family, raising new family members was essential. It kept the family strong. It kept them growing into the next generation, into the future. But then there was this great social reconstruction. New institutions emerged, and they took over more and more of the family's roles. There was new technology, transport, communication. There was books that allowed social interactions between lots of people, new kinds of social interactions. And so people were exposed to more and more information from non-family members. As a consequence, people began to see themselves as a member of many social groups. They became members of a church, they became employees in a factory, they joined a club, they joined a political party. And they internalized the goals of these other groups. They went to school, they internalized the goals of their educators. They were no longer strongly primed to inherit cultural information that furthered their family's interests. And so this whole suite of cultural norms that had existed before, these beliefs that promoted the family, they began to weaken. And among the very first of those to weaken were the ones that promoted the raising of large numbers of children. And so this is based on data collected by the European Fertility Project. These are their maps. And it shows how the fertility of married women in 1870 varied throughout Europe. And